Guests, editors Summer Brooks and Rich Handley, and the new book, Women Take the Conn. Today on episode 352 of Trekland Tuesdays Live with me, Dr. Trek Larry Nemecek, coming at you here from the heart of Trekland through Portal 47. And yes, Trekland Treks, your customized away mission. Check it out at LarryNemecek.com. Coming at you here for some sanity, clarity, and a bigger picture in all things Star Trek. And it's another Tuesday here in Trekland. It's so good to see everybody. Since it is a guest day, we're going to plunge right in very soon here with our special guest today. But first, it's a crazy busy week, and I want to make a couple of announcements, some reminders. Number one, there's some special events coming up this week, and you can participate on. In fact, they are online, all right? Number one, tomorrow is the Cisco Day. It's the second annual Cisco Day. This is something that Sirach and Ryan over at Seventh Rule Virtual Trekland put together. It's a day-long celebration, different panels virtually. Starts at 1 p.m. Pacific, well into the evening. You can check it out. I'm going to be at the 4 o'clock panel. We're going to have a reprise of our behind-the-scenes backstage panel from a year ago with stuntman Dennis Matalone, longtime lead extra Robin Morcelli. She was not on a visitor stand-in, and many, many aliens you saw on screen. And, and Lou Race, who was one of the alternating 2 first assistant directors the last 3 seasons, 5, 6, and 7 of DS9. The day is meant to remember everything Cisco. It's May 22nd, is figured from the star date when Cisco first came aboard the station. So we were not blessed with a birth date for Benjamin Lafayette Cisco. So this is what the guys came up with. They got their whole team doing. There's panels all through the day, some special guests. Our slot is at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 Eastern. You don't want to miss it. We'll have full-blown running chat. We'll probably bleed over an hour because we have a half-hour extra of empty time afterwards. We had a blast last year, and our little panel went on for another nearly an hour after we cut off the live feed. So I'm looking forward to it. There's a lot of stories and just good times there, and reacting to the chat. That is tomorrow. That is Wednesday, May 22nd. The whole afternoon and evening is Captain Cisco Day. You can check it out over at Virtual Trekland site. Oh, there's opening ceremonies. There's panels about Emissary. What? A Lambda Quadrant has an hour. The Sci-Fi Sisters have an hour. There's more that they need to update the day from. That is tomorrow. Join in on that. And then Saturday, if you haven't heard about this, to protest, to sound off about the cancellation of Lower Decks, there is a big group has put together, well, the Save Star Trek Lower Decks. All hands on decks. There's a live stream-a-thon on Saturday on May 25th. You can jump in. Who's going to be part of this? Oh, look, Sean Farrick is involved, Aaron Harvey. Just go over a special dedication to John Trimble this year. There's a lot going on. That's Saturday. If you just go to SaveStarTrekLowerDecks.com, SaveStarTrekLowerDecks.com, you can get the information now. You can see what's going on. So Cisco Day is Wednesday tomorrow. I'll see you at 4 p.m. Eastern. Sometime during the day, I'm going to get involved. I have a Cadet Alice Day on Saturday, but sometime during the day, we'll be part of SaveStarTrekLowerDecks.com, the all hands on decks. So that's tomorrow and Saturday, some fun stuff coming up. And of course, Discovery is winding down. In an atypical show like today, I want to make sure and get all those out because once we dive in with our guests, it's going to be awesome. I don't have a physical copy of the book, so I'm going to show it off right now. Boom. It's called Women Take the Conn. It's a collection of essays. It's one of those kind of books. It's unauthorized, so it's not licensed, but that's as much as a selling point as anyway. Anyway, the 2 editors are here with me. Well, we'll talk about all that. Let's bring them in right now. Hey, here's Rich Handley and boop, and the mysterious as ever, boom, Summer Brooks. So Rich and Summer, thanks for joining us on Trekland Tuesdays Live. It is so good to see you, Rich, and to see you again, Summer. Hear from you anyway.
I always enjoy talking to you too.
So let's talk about, boom, Women Take the Conn. This is the Becky Books. So what's the origination of this? Is this like a startup of a series? This kind of came out of the blue. What's the story?
So Jim Beard and I have been friends for years, and he's the creator of Becky Books. A few years back, his wife Becky passed away, unfortunately. Becky was a really very sweet person, and she and Jim had always had the same interest going back many years. She was a fellow writer, and there were a lot of projects they had hoped to work on, and unfortunately she succumbed to cancer. And he created Becky Books to sort of celebrate Becky by doing books about all the various franchises and stories and characters that she enjoyed. And Jim and I have worked on a bunch of books together over the years, and he knows that I'm a major Star Trek geek. So he said, you know, I would love to see you get involved in helping me celebrate Becky's love of Star Trek by doing a book about women in Star Trek. And I said I would be honored. There's only one problem, which is not a woman. You know, like I'm all in favor of the project and very much a feminist, but not a woman. And then so I said, I really think, you know, there should be a woman's voice involved. We need a woman co-editor because it should not be two guys saying, here's what women think. And so thankfully my friend Summer was willing to come along, and that, you know, that gave us a good deal more authenticity as a book of women's thoughts. And then I just wrote the introduction, and that was it. I didn't think I should really be writing an essay in a book about women's thoughts. So.
Oh, well, and I kind of shortchanged you both. I didn't really give you a standard introduction, but just to say that Rich and Summer are both active genre people. Rich is, well, I knew Rich when he wrote for me for the Star Trek Communicator back in the day when that was the official magazine.
Yeah.
A comics aficionado and expert, also Planet of the Apes, also other fields I'm probably not thinking. Anyway, lots of books, lots of writing over the years. Summer, I know you from Slice of Sci-Fi from over the years. I know you've got other projects too. Why don't you, what are you up to these days, and talk about what happened when Rich called you about this?
Well, Slice of Sci-Fi is my primary platform, and also known for the Babylon podcast, which literally was the very, very first podcast about Babylon 5. It technically is still going. We did an episode last year about The Road Home, the new animated film. And my love of many things, science fiction and horror, just, you know, I can't get away from it. I'm a TV addict. I love movies. And I've connected with Rich over the years about, believe it or not, comics. I think our first chat was about comics, like
I think you're right.
Hellblazer and Green Arrow, or
right,
was it? Yeah. And then the Universal Monsters. We sort of just kept, you know, finding little niches to talk about, and then I discovered his encyclopedic love and knowledge of Dark Shadows, which completely floored me. I'm like, people remember that show? Oh my God. And then one day he asked, it's like, hey, I'm doing a Star Trek book. You want in? I'm like, well, I'm not the world's biggest Star Trek fan, but sure. And that's how we came to it.
Well, that's, I want to talk about the book here, but that's, I didn't really realize that about you, Summer, till I read your, now I haven't read the whole book. I read some highlights and I read your two pieces pretty much, but I didn't realize that you weren't that big. You're like an intellectual Star Trek admirer, but not a fan.
Yes. That, you know, I appreciate what Star Trek brought to science fiction. It literally revolutionized what science fiction in popular media, popular culture could be. I never got into it. I started watching Next Generation because there was literally no other science fiction on television at the time. There was a complete desert wasteland, and then there was Next Gen. That was it.
Well, that has not kept you from having Trek guests on all your shows.
Oh no,
Slice of Sci-Fi, and that's not kept you from writing a really funny, sweet afterword to all these essays. Because there's like 24 in here.
Yeah,
I think 25.
25. Okay.
And when Summer told me what she wanted to write about, I said, "Oh, this sounds great," because just for those who don't know, the book is 25 perspectives from 25 women about 25 women in Star Trek. And so Summer said, I want to write about the one woman no one's going to think to write about, but who's the center of Star Trek, which is the Enterprise. And I said, oh, what a great idea. And it really worked well. It was a great way to cap the book.
Yeah. Well, and then I'm looking at what's the audience? I mean, like, how did you get in touch with all the writers who are all women? Some of their names I know, but a lot of them they're not necessarily like, if this was 40 years ago, they'd all be like zine editors and fan fiction writers.
Well, the forward writer, Jacqueline Lichtenberg, is exactly that.
Oh, I'm holding Jacqueline out above everybody else.
I didn't say that. That never happened.
But I shouldn't do that. She wrote, so Jacqueline Lichtenberg wrote a great introduction called Bigger Than Gunsmoke, which is a great title, a forward. Yeah. And then your introduction is I Love Lucy because she loves Star Trek, which is great.
Thank you.
10 years ago, I would have said that would have been hit harder. Today, people are starting to become aware of Lucy's wacky influence on Star Trek. I mean, important, but still obscure. Not obscure. The fact that I didn't know this until Herb Solow wrote this in his book with Bob Justman about how, according to him, Lucy thought Star Trek was a bunch of USO performers running around the South Pacific in World War II.
It's a funny story, a little bizarre, but funny. And I referenced that in my introduction.
Yes.
And I didn't cast any judgment on whether or not I believe it, but it's a funny story.
It's amazing that if she hadn't been, I don't know. I feel like she was trying to prove herself. Now, with more and more of what we get now in the dynamics. I mean, I knew years ago from everything everybody was right, especially Bob Justman and Solow's book, about the old men of Desilu who all had their jobs and they were comfortable doing the sitcoms and renting out space. And it was the fact that Lucy wanted to be bigger. And they said, if you try to get bigger, you will break us. And by bigger, she wanted to do 1-hour dramas and not just do same-os. And so, little things like Mission Impossible and Star Trek that were total, paradigm breakers.
Yeah.
And that's what broke the studio, was trying to do them. But it made it attractive enough for Paramount to buy it, even though they kept Mission Impossible going, but they never understood Star Trek aside from just the budget hog that didn't return numbers until a year later when they realized, we had plenty of numbers from. Anyway, the fact that 12
TV shows and 900 episodes later, it shows you how little insight they had.
Well, yeah, we get caught up. Well, it's the same insight that UPN didn't look at the TiVo DVR numbers for Enterprise. It was the #1 DVR show when nobody cared about we want them to watch first-time eyeballs for the commercials. Who cares who's recording it? Well, now it's a stat. But my point is that Lucy, if she'd gone along, if she'd let the old guy, the old white men who were looking after their jobs, if she had listened to them, they never would have been greenlit. So
right.
So not that she's a great sci-fi aficionado or anything, but it is kind of amazing. And she turns up in the first season blooper. They always would homage her for the rap parties. So you've got like you said, 25 women writing about 25 Star Trek women from 25 different perspectives. And we start off here with Uhura and Janice Rand and Nurse. It's all original series, we should say. Also, I noticed.
Yeah, and the movies that go along with it, and the animated series was open to it, but we ran out of space, so we had to pick 25 women that really mattered. I had hoped to get a Maress essay in there, but honestly, I can't. Summer and I couldn't honestly say that Maress was one of the most important women in Star Trek. She purred a lot and answered the phone, but she didn't really do much. And
what do you mean? She gave Majel a regular job.
That is true.
Call that.
But she does get some name checks throughout the book, and so that's good. At least she's represented. But so we have the main women from the Cage and from the original series, and then the rest of them are guest characters from the movies and the TV shows.
You've got Jillian Taylor, Carol Marcus, Savick, and Ilea, from the movies. Well, so what drove the selection process, finding the writers, the topics, matching people to some of these titles are great. I love Also Spake Zarabeth. That's
when that essay showed up, I think Summer and I did a Wayne's World We're Not Worthy, because that
Yes.
title was fantastic. Yeah.
that is.
But Summer, do you want to take that one about the choosing?
It was more about finding who had the most interesting take. Rich threw out the net and said, "Hey, we're looking for women who want to write about the women of the Star Trek original series. Give us a pitch." And we had a list of characters that people were going to pick from. And to me, the biggest surprise was we didn't have a lot of conflict. There weren't 5 people trying to do Uhura or Chapel. It was they just ran down the line and say, "Oh, this character." And for me, it was fascinating because I had no idea who half of these women were. Outside of the primary cast who were in the movies and on the original show.
Oh, you're talking about the characters.
Yeah, the characters.
I thought you were talking about authors for a second. But
No.
Oh, okay.
The guest characters, and the fact that some of them were snapped up so quickly, I'm like, wow, this is going to be a fun ride, because it's like there was a backlog, a blockage. Like they wanted to talk about these particular women, and reading some of their essays was just fascinating. Like the one about, I think, Lady Amanda was the one that got me.
Patty Jackson's essay about Uhura as well. That was
very
powerful.
Yes. Oh, that was she knocked that out of 2 ballparks.
Because much like Whoopi Goldberg, Patty was inspired by Nichelle Nichols to follow the career she did. And so she said, "Please tell me no one grabbed this one yet." And I said, "Actually, I was kind of hoping you would take that one, so I hadn't assigned it." It's one of my favorite in the book. Actually, I think they're all really good. And I know that sounds cheesy to say, because every editor is going to say that, but we were rewarded with 25 really good essays. We were very lucky. There was no point where we said, "Oh, this sucks," but it's going in.
Well, okay, so let's we get an idea of what was maybe the most surprising one that turned, I guess, the idea to do, much less the way it turned out, or unexpected turn.
For me, I think it was the Romulan commander, because I had no idea she was a thing, and like people wanted more from her, and she's off doing whatever. I'm like, what? Who is this woman? And I guess just learning about these women who I had never really paid too much attention to, beyond the top 3 who were always mentioned all over the place. I was like, this, the fact that this nameless woman could command so much intrigue and respect and curiosity, and she was never followed up on outside of I guess I'm told outside of the novels. I was like, how does this happen? That's some hellacious writing. The fact that almost 60 years later, people are going, we want more of her.
I think for me, the nice surprise was that one of my favorite essays was about Ilea, a character that really had very little character development in the movie, because she's eliminated early on. Right. I mean, it's a great performance, but there's not a lot of screen time.
And the actual character, not just the avatar for...
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And so such a there's so much depth in that essay. It's about it's split into a discussion of Ilea and the Ilea probe and Pierce's Kambata, and it's just, there was so much to be told about a character who shows up and says, "I promise not to have sex," and then dies. And so there was surprisingly really thoughtful discussion of that character.
Did of all the essays here, did you have, and I'm holding off trying to just rattle off. It's who everyone would expect. I mean, we've mentioned a couple of them here, but I mean, it's said the three female leads at one time or another. But and number one, Vina, Ariel Shaw, Marla McGivers, Layla Kalomi, Edith Kill or Die, T'Pring, Amanda Grayson, Roberta Lincoln, Romulan Commander, Miramani, Miranda Jones, Dr. Miranda Jones, Mara, Kang's wife, brilliant Klingon warrior of science, which is something I'd not stopped to think about. So there you go. Alana Troyes, yes, controversial person there. Marta, Raina Kapek, and Zarabeth, and good old Janice Lester, aside from Ilea Savick, Carol Marcus, and Jillian Taylor.
Actually, you asked about surprising things. The Janice Lester one actually comes to mind.
I was going to ask you about Janice Lester.
Yeah, so the author of that piece is trans and wanted to write that article with Janice as a model for being trans. The idea of somebody who is a woman trapped in a man's body, a man trapped in a woman's body. And so the piece is written from two perspectives. It's the same essay written twice, one from Kirk as Janice and the other one as Janice from Kirk. And it was an intriguing way to approach the character.
Yes, I'm, what? I mean, I don't know why I mean, obviously others have thought of that, and it's not my, like bread and butter mainstream, but it makes complete sense now to have us go there. Are there any that you would say are controversial, or at least controversial and challenging, like the mainstream thought, the law?
I mean, right off the bat, Janice definitely would have been a controversial character for the simple fact that it put forth the idea that women were not allowed to be captains in Star Trek, and the essay and the shows that came later challenged that absurd rule that Starfleet did or didn't have. I've always personally been of the thought that, well, Janice was crazy and Kirk was humoring her, and that is of course not the law, but he's just putting up with it because he feels bad for her. And I'd rather see it that way than the idea that 300 years from now Starfleet said no women captains.
Well, yes, because I've always thought when she says your world of starship captains doesn't admit women or something, and I was I'm thinking she's saying your world,
Kirk's world,
as in I'm married to the ship and I can't have relationships. And that's what I'd always, the people that took that literally, because within 15 years or so, we see Madge Sinclair being captain of the Saratoga. I mean, chronologically, that's the first woman we see as a captain in production terms. But
in the meantime, we saw we saw women characters taking the Conn, which means that women were allowed to be in command positions, even if we didn't see one with a captain's role.
Including Uhura, including once on the original series in an emergency, right, which is I'm going to say. So I was busy running. I thought I had this ready to go, but I want to jump in and show. Here's an example. Just all the names associated. Like how many people contributed. So what's the background of the writers? They're all women. Are they academics? Or do you have journalists?
It's a wide range.
Yeah.
There are several academics in there. There are teachers. There are novelists, the poets, essay writers. It runs the gamut. There are people who are new to publishing. There are people who've been doing it for decades. A wide range of genders and orientations and nationalities and skin colors, and the idea was to try to represent a cross section of experience levels and of personalities and perspectives. And the essays don't overlap much as a result. Like there's certain things that get brought up a lot, but just because people are referring to certain, like to Gene Roddenberry's attitudes, but each author brought her own unique perspective and background to it. That was fun to read.
I was going to say, sounds pretty diverse.
Yes.
Who put the diversity in the edict? So part of it, since you're focusing on the original series, and then I think I want you guys to jump in here, and Summer, you come back in on this too, and then maybe we can get some questions, because I'm sure our TTLers have some good questions. You know, one of the things, especially the further we get away from the 60s, aside from the whole image, the whole topic of women, and women in Star Trek, women in sci-fi, and women in all these roles and coming and going in places, if we're going to do the original series, we're looking increasingly with more in the rearview mirror at the 60s, and this, at the time, feeling Star Trek was very progressive, and then as the years have gone by, especially younger eyes looking at it cold and thinking this is progressive, but then you're going no, and then all the old timers going context, right.
Mm-hmm.
And then sometimes maybe it's like the surfaces change over time, but what is the core impetus behind? I mean, talk about that. Did any of your writers attack that, or was that a concept that you all brought to it as editors, or
it came up a
concern
lot,
about trans? You're not defending or defending or I don't know, trying to piffle those kind of things, but downplay that, but to put everything in context. How did that play out for you two?
It came up a lot, actually. It's the 900-pound space gorilla in the room, which is that, as progressive as it was for the time. I mean, it's a show that had women paraded in miniskirts and answering the phones, and there's no denying that. I mean, to deny it would actually do a discredit to the mission of the book. But at the same time, several of the authors discuss about how the individual actors managed to rise above that and elevate characters who had that working against them sometimes.
Yeah.
Miranda Jones is a great example. The essay on Miranda Jones points out the fact that Animal elevates that character, who stands out in a.
You're talking about Diana Muldaur.
Yeah. What did I say the wrong name? I'm sorry.
No. Well, Miranda Jones' character.
Yeah. But yeah, so and that she stands out for having risen above that. But then there are other essays that point out that the character did not rise above it, and the one about Janice Rand comes to mind, or Nurse Chapel, how those two end up being pigeonholed, one as Captain Look at My Legs, and the other standing around waiting for other, for McCoy to give her orders and stuff. Like, these are characters who weren't given a ton to do.
Yeah, and I'm going to come back to that, but I want to see if Summer has a thought on this.
Yeah.
Summer, the whole thing of the intersection of what we think of as progressive and feminist.
Well,
but the 60s.
It's hard. Yeah, it's hard to ignore the fact that the guys were wearing tight pants and the women were wearing mini skirts and go-go boots. And as somebody who grew up watching Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In with Goldie Hawn as a go-go dancer, it was hard for me to take that seriously back then, because it's like, it's the big heavy eye roll. But reading the essays that were submitted about how these women transcended their costumes, these characters transcended their costumes, and we have to applaud the original writers on the series for daring to think outside of the late 60s attitude towards women characters in general, and seeing how deeply these authors dove in to the characters they selected. Like I said, just about every essay blew me away. And the attention to detail, the academic perspective on something you're a fan of. And I understand that because I do that with Babylon 5. So seeing that even 60 years later, people still love these characters. There's still an interest in the lives they led then and how they may have progressed into the 70s, 80s, 90s, and beyond. It's awe-inspiring in a way.
Well, something, I grew up, initially, the whole thing with the miniskirts was just how impractical they were, much less that you're, even if you're, this whole thing about class M planets, and that's how, on the meta real world level is we're going to save production money. We can't go to ice planets and deserts all the time. That's effects, that's locations, so we're going to go to class M planets. And that also meant we didn't have to carry, most of the time we didn't carry breathing and spacesuits and all that stuff. But that said, a long sleeve shirt and a pair of pants will get you a lot further on a broader range of planets than being half naked, I mean, just for practicality's sake, much less getting into. But what's maybe 10 years ago, somebody a female fan of the time pointed out to me, well, two things. One was the two pilots, the women are wearing pants, and that it was Nichelle and Grace Lee who said, my God, can we wear skirts and show off our, I mean, it was pushed by them. I mean, I'm sure Gene was like, okay, fine. And at the time they were like, now here we're sold. Now let's go on. What are the decisions? I'd love to go back to the think tank between the network and the studio and Gene and Bill Tice and the actresses. But Nichelle, who loves to talk about it, and Grace Lee, I think both said, let's show off our, but it was a 60s. But the other thing is, what this fan about 10 years who was of the time told me was that for about 5 minutes, we look back at miniskirts now as sexist and the men are leering and all that. But for a minute there, the whole women's rebellion, the burn your bra, all of that, miniskirts were an act of rebellion because it was like the old men aren't going to tell us what to wear anymore. We're going to shake up convention. So until it became the guys saying, the men in charge saying, oh, no, keep those. At the beginning, it was an act of rebellion to take the hems that high.
I had no idea. And, from my perspective, I don't see miniskirts as convenient in a battle situation unless you're Xena.
Again, that's the practicality side of it. But as far as a socio-political thing, patriarchy, who's in charge, who's running what here, it was there for a time.
Yeah.
It was a huge act of feminist rebellion to wear your skirt.
Yeah, it was women choosing to dress how they wanted to.
Yeah, it was choice.
A 60s version of flappers, basically.
I could see that as a situation where they're thumbing their nose at the TV censors. I could see that totally.
Mm-hmm. Same network as Laugh-In. Let me go over here and see. Hey, everybody. Since on a guest day I don't separate the chat. Let me see what we've and I don't know if Summer, you or Rich saw something in here you want to jump into. And
but the question was basically there were so many women. How do you choose?
Oh, here you go. It was
Mona.
Mona.
While I was about to.
Boom. Hey,
there
Mona.
you go. Yeah. So that was actually something that Summer and Jim and I bandied about because with 79 episodes plus the pilot, plus 7 movies involving the original crew, plus the animated series, and you're only talking 25 essays. Mm-hmm. Right off the bat, we're down to only a quarter of the available stories that we could actually cover. So Jim and I came up with it. This is where the experience level made a difference because, as Summer has explained, that she was not a major fan to begin with. She was extremely helpful from an editing standpoint, and it was kind of cool to get a perspective of someone who was learning from these essays.
Not marinate. I was going to say this a minute ago. That was a great perspective of someone who had some distance and was not
exactly
baked in the DNA.
Yeah. And so, Jim and I, it's a good way to put it, marinating in it. Jim and I did marinate in it, and so we were trying to come up with a list, and there were some on the list originally, like Maress, for example. Well, that would be fun to put in there. But realistically, some of them just didn't have as much of an impact. And so that was the way that the choices were made, were who are the ones that made a lasting impact, or who would authors be most likely to have something interesting to talk about. And the example that comes to mind for me is Number One. I wanted Number One in there. Jim didn't think that that would be all that interesting an essay, only because Number One doesn't do a whole lot in the pilot. And in fact, that's part of the characters that she has sidelined. My argument was, yes, but first of all, Strange New Worlds.
Right.
But second of all, the whole point was she was the first female character, like not and played by the first lady of Star Trek. Not having her in there seems to me like that would have been a mistake. And it turned out to be one of the most interesting essays. So I was very glad that we did that. But that was basically the idea, was looking at each of these characters that we had on a list, like 35, 40 people, and then whittling it down by who would make for the most interesting subjects. And unfortunately for me, as a diehard fan like Aaron Harvey of the animated series, Maress did not make the cut, and I have to agree with Jim's reasoning.
Yeah, but I mean, you're right on Number One. It's people are fascinated to talk about her just from the glimpse. But now we have what Strange New Worlds brought to us. And let me just say too, also, you mentioned this a minute ago, and let me throw it out. And Summer, are you watching any of the Treks currently, even just like occasionally, or are you not trekking at all?
I was watching Discovery because I wanted to see how they shifted what we already knew, you know, from the Star Trek lore. And I was able to watch the first 2 seasons before it was, I think, paywalled. I'm like, really, Paramount? You're gonna do, really? It's Star Trek. You're gonna do, really?
You're one of the God meant for Star Trek to be free. Yeah.
And it's like, that's what the merch is for, right?
You'll go far in media, not in TV.
So the idea that Discovery launched all these other spin-offs, that the interest was there, and when they saw, oh, Discovery's doing well, hey, we've got this, that, they went animated, they went future, they went past, they went speculative, and 2 different types of animation. I'm like, wow, yeah, they've ignored these people for way too long, because this is kind of fascinating. And I'm not following any of them like religiously, but I'm keeping up with where the story's going. And Lower Decks, I'm not usually a fan of humor. You know, I hate sitcoms and rom-coms with the white hot fiery passion of like 10,000 suns. But Lower Decks is amusing, and they should keep that one around.
That's my favorite of the new shows, actually. I adore Lower Decks.
I talk to many people whose favorite of all the new shows is Lower Decks. Right. Well, the reason I brought that up with you, Summer, and you can both talk about this, is since we went here, and the book is original series people, but there's that, you can't help, Strange New Worlds has brought us not just, you know, Uhura, but Chapel and Number One, both who got, you know, both, aside from both of them being major characters, but they both got so little screen time. Number One, the one that seems to be respectable to go into, but you said it, Rich. Chapel was like, you know, if they look at Uhura as a telephone operator, and Chapel or Rand says, I've got, you know, look at my legs and serve you coffee. But Chapel stands around for McCoy to tell her what to do, which is what a head nurse does. But at the same time, I would say that Jess Bush's portrayal, obviously the role the character has in the mix of characters is way different. And Jess is amazing with her, and people saying this is so not following on the original series. And I would say, oh ho, you're judging Chapel by what we were allowed to see of her. And most of the time we were only allowed to see her standing there with a surgical tray with McCoy. But whether it was Gene pushing for Majel or it was organic to the story or whatever, there were 2 or 3 times when she had a moment to shine. In fact, there's one episode where she saves the day, right? Return Tomorrow. right? Sargon and Thalassa. And Chapel is the one that houses Sargon and saves the day at the end. Talk about gender swapping. But this whole thing about it wasn't there. I mean, I said somewhere on the way that somewhere Majel is looking down and smiling both at Jess Bush, smiling up at the point she says, now, why didn't you do that for me? Because we saw what she did with Loxana Troy. I mean, she could have, I mean, if they had let Chapel do that, they were always hiding the fact that it was Jean's mistress. So they were always a little bit on, you know, back at that point. But when they gave Chapel something to do, save the day and return to bar, or the time when she runs in and screams at Ensign Garavik, now you take this and it's your blah, blah, blah. And then they leave and McCoy picks up the tape and he says, this is Dr. McCoy's specific instructions for your diet and blah, blah, blah. And then he comes back later on and looks at it and says, you know, it's some boring medical study, a survey of Signian respiratory diseases. And she goes, it's a little psychology. I mean, she had her moments. And so nothing that Jess Bush is doing as Chapel, it seems out of line. It's like if they just let Majel's too far, and we don't have Majel to come back and try again with. Right, so right. I'm just, I don't know if you mentioned number one. Did your Chapel essay for either one of you get to do any kind of fast forward looking at what was happening with Chapel on Strange New?
The essays of the three women who have made it to Strange New Worlds all discuss the Strange New Worlds aspect. What our instructions to the writers were that first and foremost, it was a book about the original series.
Right.
The animated series and the movies were also fair game if they wanted, because like Chapel and Uhura are in the animated series, and Uhura is in the movies, Chapel less so. So work that in. If you want to discuss the modern era, you can for context, but it shouldn't be a Strange New Worlds essay, because the mandate was Becky was a major fan of the original series, and that was the mandate. But yeah, those three essays and several others discuss it for context. You know, one of the things that came up a lot was that this is a 1960s attitude. This is a 1960s approach to women. It's a shame it wasn't being done like it is now, but it laid the groundwork for what is coming, for what is there now. And that was actually my argument to Jim about including number one, because as sidelined as number one sometimes was, she created the template. She characters like number one and Uhura, and even to some extent Chapel and Rand, set the stage for all of these amazing female characters that came after the original series. Without them, we would not have had the ones from Next Generation up to the present. And that context is discussed in the book, even though the main thrust of it is about the original series. The modern portrayals of number one Uhura and especially Chapel end up getting discussed in very favorable terms.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost a meta of Nichelle in Trouble with Tribbles when she says, "And how often do I get shore leave?" I can hear Nichelle saying, "And how often do I get an actual scene to play?"
Right.
I want to address a question. Melanie from Facebook, she was mentioning how the Enterprise gets mentioned as a lady in I, Mud. And yeah, my essay is about the Enterprise. Yeah, she's the woman that closes off the book. So yeah, we do cover the Enterprise there, Melanie, and I did rather a deep dive into Kirk's love and love affair with the Enterprise. Yeah. I mean, it's just like you've got, Kirk in the Enterprise, you've got Han Solo in the Millennium Falcon, you've got Malcolm Reynolds in Serenity. There's a pattern there. There's a history, as someone who fell in love with a 1966 Mustang Shelby Cobra when she was 8 years old. I get it, cars and ships and spaceships, starships. There's that one that grabs you, and the Enterprise is not that one for me, but I see what that love for that particular starship has done the genre, for the franchise, and I get it. I truly do. So
how about just inspiring generations? I mean, it's, center stage of the National Air and Space Museums.
yeah, I mean, you got Star Trek inspired scientists to go into space, and then those scientists, what they did inspired new generations of science fiction fans. We had people who worked at NASA helping Babylon 5 get the movements of the starships, the spaceships right. And I'm like, and it just continues on. It just continues on. Science fiction, science fiction, space exploration. And it's all hand in hand. And it started with, well, some people would argue Flash Gordon, but I'm going to say it started with Star Trek.
Well, see, that's why that shouldn't have to be a Star Trek fan to have a great perspective. I enjoyed reading her afterward a lot, and it was just such a lot. There was a lot to be said there for someone who was relatively new to the franchise, and I hope everybody reads the after. A lot of people will skip intros and afterwards, and I hope people read what the two of us had to say, because we looking at it from discussing Lucy's
bonus material.
Yeah, exactly. That's what we are. Yeah. But Lucy's involvement, and then the Enterprise as a woman, I thought were pretty cool little add-ons to the 25 character studies.
So I'm going to throw, so Mona, this is what I alluded to, and we talked on, the more time moves on, the harder it is to convince the younger ones of context. Well, I mean, one of the things that I've found about that, there's a couple of phrases I've used over time. They're helpful in workplaces. Sometimes it's about age. Sometimes it's just about experience and familiarity with anything. Sometimes I'll talk about the arrogance of the new, and I hate to say the arrogance of the young, because I think we have a good dynamic between fresh blood versus experience, and we need both. And when you have a dynamic tension here, but it is like when we talk here on Tuesdays Live, when I talk on the Trek Files, or with the Portal 47 gang, you can't help not know what you don't know, right? So we all grow up at our own time, and just communicating, the whole. It's amazing to me how we've turned into a battle of generations or whatever. When I was growing up, the boomers were the generation that came back after World War II and had babies. I mean, that was the babies they had. And no one beyond that, it was a phenomenon that overburdened schools and tax bases. I mean, it wasn't and then as they aged, then it became a thing for, government bureaucrats and anything else. And then after that, well, look, the baby boomers a generation, then we have, all the other ones. And so now we sit around and talk about X and Y and Z but everybody, you can't help but grow up. Did you have computers or not? Did you live your whole life on a small screen, or did you have 3 channels and you lived out in the boonies, or did you have instant access to information around the whole world and video? Were there racial and other incidents that happened that no one believed, or did you have a camera to record things and cause some social reset and uproar? I mean, everybody has their own thing. But that said, if we're going to keep going back to products and be inspired, or have a narrative about something, and then either forget it or coast along, and some new group has a new perspective on it, maybe they weren't there, but also maybe it's a new way to look at it. And so talking about everything like the mini skirts, talking about the women's roles, it's hard for people to say, why was this such a hot show? One thing I say is, go and look at what else was on TV. And forget science fiction. Just go look at what else those 3 channels offered you, because there's a reason why classics are classics, because everything else was pablum or schlock, or just.
Yeah, and I would say that I'm not a new fan, just more of a casual fan. I've always known about Star Trek. I just was never pulled in. Like I said, I watched Next Generation because there was no other science fiction on TV.
Yep.
But there's
desperation. You became a fan out of
yes. I was starving for science fiction on TV, and that's what I got. That's what I got. But there's a question from Jen from Facebook.
I think we may have covered it earlier, but
yeah, I mean, I think that the idea behind it really was to point out that women women, although it was seen as a franchise with male heroes, women were very much involved in Star Trek and important in Star Trek, and women's perspectives matter, which is why all of the essays are written by women, which is why they only discuss women characters, and that it's not something that should ever be underestimated. It's something in the modern shows that has been corrected, which is that there's a much wider diversity, and thankfully so, between gender and orientation and nationality and skin color and religion. Back then, it was the white guys did everything and the women looked hot, and that's an unfortunate aspect of the '60s, but it is unavoidable in this discussion. But at the same time, that also we have to make sure not to overlook the fact that despite that, there were many moments when the women characters rose above it, and that was what this book was meant to highlight. That the women were more important, and we don't want to let that get buried in the discussions of sexism.
Right. Well, you can't change history, but you can.
Right.
But that doesn't mean history is all just one big blank slate of gray. I mean, there are highs and lows, highlights and shadows, right? And Star Trek was definitely a highlight. Again,
and 30 or 40 years from now, people will look at the modern group of shows when the next group of shows are out and they're all in 3D beamed directly into your head, and people are going to look at Strange New Worlds and Picard and Lower Decks and go, "Wow, they had no idea what they were doing. What a quaint period!" You know, when the attitudes change again, like they have now, this is
happening with. Yeah, it's happening. Well, it's gone both ways. DS9 and even Voyager are I think Voyager is respected more for the women, for Janeway at the top and being a breakthrough, and Seven and B'Elanna, and some of the other characters. But I think DS9 is respected like top to bottom for the vibe and the production and the serialized and the the portrayal of Cisco and Jake as a father.
But Bashir the Creeper in the early seasons doesn't stand up as well now.
Yeah,
and that's my favorite of Bashir the Creeper in the early seasons doesn't stand up as well. And Deep Space Nine is my favorite Star Trek show, and I hate to say that because I love Bashir, but those early seasons don't stand up as well because Bashir is super creepy at times. Yeah. But that's a paradigm shift. That's an example of what I mean. Well, that the 60s changed, the 90s changed, and eventually the 2020s will change into something else, and people will look at Strange New Worlds and go, "Wow, they thought they were progressive."
That's what I mean when I say the arrogance of the new, and I don't mean, and not young, but new. I mean, new eyes, and I don't mean that as a knock, because we always need a fresh approach. It's always good to have a fresh. I'm always preaching, don't get out of your ruts. Be aware of the blinders you might have, that things have changed and you haven't kept up with it. Read the room around you, maybe. But I lost my train there. But
that's my fault.
I have opinions on Deep Space Nine and Voyager, and I don't think they're quite appropriate to share here.
Oh, DS9 and Voyager. Okay.
Now I'm intrigued.
Yeah, now because to me those are such different shows.
They were. I was a fan. I wanted to love Voyager, and then that episode Threshold happened, and I wanted to punch a wall.
In what? Because of plausibility, or because the babies were left behind, or
everything about that entire situation was wrong. So wrong. I mean, it's like, I'm being, genetically devolved. Let me kidnap my captain because I have a secret crush on her and make babies with her. And let's leave the babies behind and like ignore the 10-ton elephant in the room for the rest of the series. I'm like, really?
A 10-ton salamander.
That too. Yeah. I'm like, really? You're gonna do that?
The Borg baby is down there somewhere too. It was never referred to again either.
What
I was gonna say was the first. After like TNG was the most right, and then the other series, divided the fan base, and then through Enterprise and things faded. And by that time, people were starting. I was hearing the first people saying, "Oh, Next Generation is so 80s. It's so 80s. There's carpet on the walls and a counselor on the bridge. It's so 80s." And I was like, Well, no, that was the thing. See, PTSD,
It was.
and they ignored
It was.
mental health, and that was Troy was a sign. It wasn't always,
Yeah.
engineered the best, but she was a sign of,
Apparently, I'm one of like 5 people who really, really enjoyed the episode with the devil who was in love with Picard, Ardra. Oh my God, that episode was so hilarious. Was hilarious.
I'm one of the other 4 then, because I think it's a funny episode. So.
It's interesting, but it's a good perspective to say, look it's the Connecticut Yankee kind of thing. It's the trickster who's got the technology. It's the same thing as like burning off Rasmussen pretending to be a time traveler when he wasn't, but he was just bluffing.
That was another fun episode.
Well, we've kind of I'm gonna dig back in here to see.
Okay.
So Jen, thank you for being there, and Jen's coming from Germany and maybe a first timer. And guys, gals, peeps, if you are a first timer with us today, make sure and sound off. Somebody, I forget who, was saying that they enjoy. Donnie's saying he enjoys Lower Decks better than DSC, but his current #1 is Prodigy, which I've heard people say Prodigy's their
Prodigy's fantastic. It died too soon.
Yes, well, it's season 2 coming, and there's hope for a season 3.
Yeah,
we'll
exactly.
See.
Is Prodigy the one that got revived by Netflix?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, it was always the shows were made.
Yeah.
It's who will run them and then consider a third.
Yes, but it hadn't aired. That was the problem.
Right.
There were episodes that hadn't aired, and Netflix is going to air them. And then we're all going, then do more. But we'll see what happens.
As Donnie was saying, Netflix and I hope they're just not. I'm afraid they're just going to dump Prodigy all in one dump instead of having week-to-week drops, which is better for Star Trek, and I would think it would be better for the network. But again, you can't tell new people something, or they have their template, and they're not going to change it. They'll have 82 people's jobs depend on just dumping shows at once.
Plus, networks always seem like whatever the right decision is, they're going to turn around 180 degrees and go in the other direction. So I've given up on trying to assume networks are making the right decisions anymore. I've just learned to just shrug and go, well, that happened.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing. The Enterprise ended the same way the original series did. Like, there was a paradigm shift that was ahead of Star Trek, was once again ahead of everybody else and paid the price for it. So, which is why I wonder how especially Discovery. There's topics here I'd love to get into here.
I actually wrote an essay about the final episode of Enterprise. I was annoyed that they did that.
Everybody was annoyed that
they did which? Because there's like 7 things you could go through.
Yeah.
I think for me the biggest foul. I mean, we're talking red cards, personal foul, ejection from the field kind of thing, was the cop out with the ending. It wasn't about the Enterprise. It was about Riker struggling to do something, and then he goes off to mention this historic speech, and we don't even get a word of it.
What really? Do you mean? It's the lost scenes of Pegasus. What do you mean?
Mm-hmm.
No, now I thought that the whole Archer talking at the Federation founding was the best part, and not just because I was in the audience. I was a guest extra, but that was the part that was. Yeah, and people are pissed about killing off Trip and all of that.
Thankfully, the novels fixed that one, but yeah.
Let me see here. JR says back then it seemed like it was an all-boys club with a few morsels of characters taking point at Kipling. Well, it wasn't just about men. It was like, I always say, it was lead, second, banana, and everybody else. And it's a testament to first D. Kelly that he rose above that, and they felt compelled to make him a third. And then getting to the movies where it was a testament to all those actors who took nothing, male and female, and made something of it that was so memorable that the fans, with 10 years of germinating, demanded they all been, and the studio was too scared, and Gene was too scared to do something without all of them. And look at even the animated series, right? The reaction about not having everybody, and they got everybody but Walter, like bottom rung of the totem pole there. But Leonard standing up for having George and Nichelle. just as voicing their character on an animated.
Yeah.
Anyway, but by the time you got the movies it's like, I say that it dawned on me one time that the original series started off in that 60s mold of billing order and wound up becoming an ensemble more by the movies, and Next Gen started in the ensemble revolution, and by the movie time became Picard, Data, and everybody else pecking order. Like it got movie-fied, where they passed each other. It feels
yeah.
like.
Star Trek is sometimes described as having been an ensemble cast, but the truth of it is that when it started, it was very much in the paradigm of how 60s television shows were done, which is why you had 2 people listed in the opening credits, and then 3, and then everybody else at the end, because that's just simply how it was done. The ensemble aspect came because people really liked it, and so it emerged into something more. But the truth is, I during the pandemic, I rewatched everything, and one of the things that really stood out to me was just how little some of particularly Uhura and Sulu, how little those 2 had to do. And the unfortunate thing is, they're the non-white ones. It becomes uncomfortable that the 2 non-white characters have the least to do. And but it's easy to knock that, but it's also important to say 60s, and that doesn't excuse it, but it is in fact a product of the time, and it got corrected. Sulu getting his own ship, for example. And I'll tell you the one thing that has always bugged me, though. Uhura is the only actor or actress from the original series who didn't come back. I know Prodigy had a scene with her, but everybody else, including Rand and Chapel and even Kyle, managed to come back in some form. And other than showing up in the original series movies, Uhura never did. She was the only one. And I kept hoping they would find a way to bring Nichelle Nichols back. And honestly, what I had hoped is that it would be connected to Guinan. I kept hoping she'd play like Guinan's daughter or something. Just because it
was floating out there. Okay, so two things real quick, Rich. So number one, there was a chance. They offered Nichelle a chance in Flashback, the Voyager 30th anniversary show that had George and had Sulu and Rand in it. They wanted to have a scene where Sulu and the Excelsior are talking to Enterprise, almost like 6 was. And it would have been a view screen scene, and she would have been on the view screen sitters. And Nichelle didn't want to do it if it was only going to be a view screen scene.
Yeah, which is unfortunate.
So she was offered that, and maybe they should have found another way to do it. Yeah, but there was the chance. But the other thing was talking about just their like watching the originals and seeing how little Sulu and Uhura had to do. I am not defending the 60s at all.
Right, exactly.
But I should point out that number one, they made sure to have, if it was there to begin with, there was Alden was back there, but even when Nichelle wasn't doing, and you could say, well, crap, she had to show up and be there all day long and never have a line. But how many episodes, especially first season into the second, that she's back there and the camera has her and she's acting her heart out and, starfleeting away, no lines, nothing to do with the plot, but she's back there. And if there's view screen reaction drama going on, she's right there with them.
Acting. And it's what she represents and what Sulu represented that mattered. Because
now
when this came out, it was at the time of the Civil Rights Movement, only 20 years after World War II. And here we had an Asian person and a black person sitting on the bridge, and one of them a woman in a room full of men. They may not have been given enough to do, but that representation mattered.
And the other thing I was going to say was, remember that by choice, George went off to do the Green Berets, a movie, and was gone, and that's what opened up Chekhov as a character. Else all the Chekhov stuff second season would have been mostly, they wanted Chekhov to be the young, the Monkees, Beatles crowd, not necessarily, but it just happened that he was there to take over. And he was
hilarious. I mean,
when George went away for half the year.
But so he also, then he got more work. I think it's probably because he was hilarious. I think people connected with him.
Oh yeah. Well, they had a lot of fun with it, and they had a lot of that was the Russia joke and being the young dating dreamboat or whatever. But a lot of that went even beyond that because George was gone and absent. So that what I'm saying is it not that it's a contest between the two of them, but Sulu lost a lot of screen time because George good for him, got to go do playing a Vietnamese colonel.
I absolutely never would have made the monkey's haircut connection if you hadn't said that. That's hilarious. I love it.
Oh,
Well, that was intentional. Yeah.
that was Dave, not Beatles, but Davy Jones monkeys. Yeah, there's memes. I mean, I think I've made at least one meme of it.
Oh,
Yeah. In
goodness.
fact, he wears a wig for 2 or 3 episodes until his hair grows out long enough to.
No, they were definitely doing that. They were doing that knowingly.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. I'm gonna. We've kept you over an hour here. I'm gonna look in the questions here and seeing, talking about. This is true, Rockio, and you're a good. Thank you for commenting so much on YouTube later on too. Perception is the highest form of fallibility. I mean, that's something that has to be reinvented every generation. That's why it falls to historians, but also challenges to perception and keeping sometimes that swings. It seems like, it's just like been a revelation that 3/4 of the founding fathers owned slaves. Well, that's because the population base was Virginia. It's like, it's what it was. You can excuse it. You hope history moves on and wrongs are corrected. But that's why, unfortunately, so much stuff is built into the DNA of the Constitution that way, like the electoral colleges. Okay. We got a far field from women in Star Trek. Let's see. Yeah, I should have just made this the first opening chapter in Cisco Day. Has nothing to do with DS9, but we're having a good talk. Well, thank you, Dave. There you go, guys, gals, peeps. We're getting spoiled with the latest live guests.
Aw, thank you.
There you go.
Thank you.
Dave is agreeing with you, Summer. Summer, the non-real fan. They did do Enterprise wrong with that ending, which I think is kind of a universal conceit. And Brannon has Mia
Even the
culpa
cast members have said it.
Yeah. JR says Enterprise didn't officially end. They just didn't air more episodes. Here we go.
Just sort of backed into the bushes like Homer Simpson. Yeah.
Yep. Hi, Brian, from me back home in OKC. I'm not a guest at SoonerCon this year for the first time in a long time. So everybody have a good time. And it sounds like there's a chain con or something coming through town there too. Well, yeah, JR. Well, the part of this, he says, loved the actors stuck with the characters and wanted more for themselves and characters. TOS actors stuck with. Part of that was the phenomenon of the 70s. One of the things that Star Trek was so new about was it was such a hit. It totally, and if you were an unknown, which all of them basically were, it wiped you out for casting. I mean, they were all so typecast. They hadn't prepared for it. And it kind of swiped, it kind of grabbed them. And so when the fan phenom took off with the conventions, it was hard for a lot of them to get work after that. And so after a time, it was the love it or leave it thing, Yeah, and so they said, okay, fine. If this is going to be my legacy and my destiny, I'll embrace it and ride it to the hilt. So
hence book called I Am Not Spock, and then another one called I Am Spock. Yeah.
I will throw out a nugget for the listeners, because another franchise that I'm just a casual fan of is Doctor Who. But as I said before, I watch a lot of television, probably too much television. But there is an episode of Midsummer Murders that features Peter Davison and Alice Krieg, and they play a married couple who hate each other, and it's all about spies during the Cold War. I think it's called Secrets and Spies is the episode, but it's a fun episode to watch those two playing off each other, because they are literally heads and shoulders and hips above all the rest of the background actors. It's so funny to watch them playing off each other.
Doctor Who is a series where women have always been at the forefront. I mean, you could write a 12-volume set called "Women Take the TARDIS," and you would not run out of women to discuss.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Yes. Here's one. So hey, Sean, he says Uhura does come back in Prodigy in the Ultimate Kobayashi Maru team setup. Yes.
Sure. Yeah. No,
but
I
it's not original footage.
It's not original. Yeah, exactly. It's not Michelle recording new lines.
Yeah. Melanie says, "Gosh, they looked a lot." Come on, Gosh, they looked a lot alike. I was like, yeah, it was intention. Yes. Very funny, JR.
I never would have made that connection.
Yeah.
Hey, we're the away team. People say we transport around.
I think you have to do it authentic though. Hey, we're the away team. Yeah.
Okay, so who's in the bed being pushed down the street then?
Is it Mickey?
Are
you asking this because you know, or you just
no? I'm asking if you were replacing the monkeys with people from the Enterprise's bridge, who's in the bed?
Jillian Taylor would be the one being pushed down the street on a gurney.
Oh no!
Oh, okay, too literal. Hey, thank you, Pranakasha. Prawn. Can I call you Prawn? Thank you for that. It's been a long time. Let me see here. Yes. Oh, here's a shout out for your Doctor Who talk. Hi, the Trek reviewer. Hey guys, first time coming over on Twitch. Wow. Okay, a lot of Doctor Who love here. I think we're to the end of the chat, as it's often as they like to call it here. Yeah. Listen, guys, let me pop this up once again. There and here. Where is it available, guys?
Amazon and where all books are sold.
Yep.
Okay, there we go.
Also, you can go to the Becky Books website, which you can access via Facebook. And yeah.
All right. Well, thank you guys for coming on. Has anybody talked? I know this was inspired by his late wife and company namesake Becky, who was the original series fan. But is there any talk about doing this with any of the other series or etc.?
Well, Summer and I have talked about it. Jim, the thing is, I think Jim wants, at least from Becky Books, Jim wants to just do the one because the idea was this was one of Becky's favorite shows. So they've done Classic Monsters, they've done Dark Shadows, which I contributed to as well. And it's the stuff that really meant something to Becky. Jim is a Star Trek fan, and I'm sure he's seen many series since then.
Yeah.
But I think from Becky Books, this will probably be the only one, unless everybody in the chat contacts Jim Beard and says, make more.
Just want to know, we had a question. When will the book be out? The book is already out. You can buy it in ebook format and print format. It came out at the end of March. It took me a little extra time to get my hard copy because I totally missed the email saying, hey, tell me where to send your copy.
You're just a co-editor. What do you need a copy?
That's right. So, but no,
you already read it.
Yeah,
it's already available. So you can head on over to Amazon, Barnes and Noble. I don't know if it's in Bookshop. It might be, but you should be able to go to your favorite online retailer and order a print copy. I think the ebook copy may only be through Amazon. I'm not 100% sure about that.
We didn't do our due diligence. We should have asked Jim about that beforehand. Yeah.
How many books has he published? How far along is the company?
Well, it's a tricky question because he has sort of absorbed some of his other stuff into Becky Books as he's gotten the rights back. So the back catalog is growing from stuff that he and or Becky worked on before. I don't know how many he has at the moment. I think his goal is to get a lot of stuff there retroactively. Yeah. I'm sorry, Summer, go ahead.
No, I think it's over 15, maybe closer to 20, but I know that there are at least 3 books on the original Batman TV series because he's a fan of that one.
I co-edited those, so yeah.
Hey, so are any of the books topics like past 1990, or is this all going to be?
It tends to be older stuff. Jim Beard and I are like minds in that. Well, my wife always tells me I was born too late. That I'm really a product of earlier decades, and Jim is like me in that regard.
Anyway, thanks again for joining us, everybody. The book, once more, is Women Take the Conn. There we go. Edited by Summer Brooks and Rich Handley from Becky Books, with a foreword by Jacqueline Lichtenberg, the great first-generation Trek fan.
We were so excited to be able to bring her in. That was wow. For those who haven't read Star Trek, Star Trek Liz, read it. Yeah.
There we go. Boom. Okay, guys. Well, thank you again, and thanks for coming on, and good luck with this and everything down the line.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay. And hang on, folks. We will just jump back here to normal mode. Just wrap up a little bit. I think we're all chatted out. I just wanted to repeat for everyone, and I'm not doing graphics. We'll do them for the live show. But Wednesday, tomorrow, the 22nd, all day, starting at 1 p.m. Pacific, is Captain Sisko Day. Several panels all through the day celebrating all things Avery Brooks, all things Captain Sisko. It's pegged to the day, the start date that Sisko came aboard DS9. This is the second annual event. It's from our friends over at Sirach and Ryan and Dr. Anne Marie. I don't know if she's in the chat today. I hadn't seen her. All those folks, it's the second year. I am thrilled to do one at 4 o'clock with the same gang I had last year, backstage DS9ers. It feels kind of like a Portal 47 circus because I've had all 3 of them on as Portal 47 guests for our Portal 47 group. But it's Robin Morcelli, who was Nana Visitor's stand-in and often on camera as a Bajoran and other things. And Dennis Madelone, who's the stunt coordinator for all the Berman Treks years, after Next Gen got established. I'm sorry, most of Next Generation, DS9, and Voyager, not Enterprise. And then Lou Race, who was first assistant director, was there through slogging all the episodes, every other episode, the last 3 seasons. Anyway, it'll be a lot of fun. That's at 4 Pacific, 7 Eastern, right here on my channel. They roll from host to host channel. There is no central Sisko Day. So you'll get in, go to the site, go to the 7th rule, go to the virtual Trekland YouTube and find the schedule there. And then that's tomorrow. Saturday is the big Save Lower Decks campaign. I don't want to say protest campaign. That's all day. Most of the day, go over to SaveStarTrekLowerDecks.com. They've got a page. A lot of folks contributing. There's some in and out happening. I'll be in and outing sometime during the day. Might even have a little guest with me when I pop in. We'll see how that goes. So the idea there is to run up the numbers. The idea is to have a marathon viewing of Lower Decks all day long to run up the numbers and then share online programming. So that's 2 parts. Part of it is turn on Lower Decks and let it run while it's still on Paramount Plus, although it's going to stay there. Unlike Prodigy, it's apparently going to stay there, which makes going somewhere else potentially problematic. We'll have to see. And then there'll be a lot of programming. Anyway, go over to SaveStarTrekLowerDecks.com and check that out. So busy week, online, virtual. You've got no excuse. There's also cons happening. Summer's coming up. I'm going to be hopefully at Comic-Con San Diego. I'll know I'll be at Trek Vegas. Things are all up in the air about exactly what's happening. I'm so excited about being on the cruise next year, which is 95% sold out, but still has places. Interesting, fun year. It's been a year of change here as this is Trekland Part 2, version 2, and our new digs here, and hopefully some more things to come by the end of the year. I think that's doing us. Yes, if you are watching us live on YouTube later, thanks for doing so. But I just want to say once again, if you are going to be in the LA area for business or pleasure, it's time to set up your own personalized away mission. We'll go to 4 location sites in Southern California. That's everything but the Toronto shows. I've got the list. I'll escort you. We'll work it out in advance. It'll be an awesome day. Bring your cosplay, bring your props, bring your stuffed animals or your action figures that you take on vacation for your photos. We'll work it out. I'll pick you up, take you back. 6 hours, 4 sites, and an in and out or like similar lunch. It's an awesome day. And you get to plan it with my help. We'll try to steer clear of all the traffic insanity in the closed museums. We'll avoid all that, right? Most of all, hey, I want to thank our TTLers. So thank you, Diana Hopkins, Robin Wilson, Lawrence Todd, Josh Patton, Justin Porteous, Gabrina Bruton, Chris Jiggins, Pranakasha Productions. Thank you for the silver there, Pranakasha. Comedy Forecast and Andrew Jasimski. And our live wires, Robert McLean, Byron Bailey, G.R. Poole, Halbjörn Gunnjonsson, Alan Hoenzi, Dave Gregory, Tobias Rex, Donna S. Runyon, Greg Wickstrom, and Casey Shafsky. Thank you so much for being a Patreoner. And again, the simple system that I have, $5-10 a month. Patreon.com/Trekland Live. I appreciate the support. We've gradually been growing what we're doing here. And hey, elsewhere around Trekland, the Trek Files is still on hiatus. We're working on our comeback date. There's still 11 seasons of wonderful content there, 15, 20-minute bites. They're perfect for commuting, perfect for the short treadmill sessions. A lot of Star Trek history with a lot of some folks who have passed. Check it all out. It's available anywhere, but the documents, the actual files of Trek Files, are at our Facebook page, the Trek Files. Alrighty. And yeah, I'm elsewhere, Larry Nemecek on X, Twitter. Instagram is a lot of fun. I just put some new stuff up. If you're new to us, please like and subscribe, especially here on YouTube. If you're there, appreciate that. And if you are watching later on YouTube, know that we're here live at 1-ish on Tuesdays Pacific, 4-ish Eastern. And that translates to 9 UK time and 10 Central Europe. And somehow the Aussies managed to come in and stay with us too. That's going to do it. Another special guest format next week. Not just because of the American Memorial Day holiday, but because of domino effects up and down the week. I'm going to take a week off next week. So we've had 2 guest weeks in a row. We will be back after that. No Tuesday, the 28th of May, but we'll be back on June 4th. All right. Taking next week off, back on Tuesday, June 4th. All right. So as always, thank you so much, everybody, for joining in. It was great to have Rich and Summer with us today. Check out their book. And that will do us. That will do us. We'll see you tomorrow at 4, potentially, on Captain Sisko Day for our Backstage at the Niner, the sequel. And let your meter spin with Lower Decks playing all day on Saturday for Save Star Trek Lower Decks. And if you're in with the crowd, check out their page.com. Check it out. And I'll be bopping by sometime in the day. I'll let you know on Twitter if something else more specific comes along. Till next week, till 2 weeks from today. Hey, everybody, take it easy out there, would you please? Stay healthy, do all the things. And yes, stay woke. Check your sources. That whole thing about keeping your blinders on or off, as the case may be. And Trek well, everybody.